Why did the storm feel like it was chasing them? The rain came in sheets, hammering the crumbling barricade where 6 of America's finest warriors crouched in the mud. Navy SEALs, bloodied, exhausted, outnumbered, and now out of ammo. "Empty," Commander Jason Reynolds muttered, tossing aside his last magazine. The words carried heavier than the storm itself. His men looked back at him, their eyes reflecting the truth no one dared say out loud. This was the end. Lightning tore the sky wide open, for just an instant revealing dozens of figures closing in through the flooded forest. Enemy shadows multiplying. The SEALs gritted their teeth, ready for the final push. And then, a shot. Clean, precise, perfect. It split the stormy night like a thread of light, finding its mark in a man's skull through walls of rain. He dropped instantly. Before panic could spread, 3 more fell, each in rapid surgical succession. No muzzle flash, no sound, just death from nowhere. The SEALs froze. Whoever was out there had just saved their lives, but from where, who, and why? That night was only the beginning. Because the unseen hand in the storm wasn't chance, it was a secret 15 years in the making. And the woman holding that rifle, she wasn't supposed to exist, not anymore. What? Morning sunlight broke through the Adirondack peaks, a calmer world than the chaos of the night before. A small town, quiet, lakeside, the kind of place that tried to forget the wars raging oceans away, but not everyone in Lakeside lived as they appeared. At precisely 9 o'clock, Catherine Morgan unlocked the door to her gunsmith shop with a movement that was more habit than thought. Every action was measured, almost rehearsed, as if time itself were her sparring partner. The shop gleamed like a gallery of steel and oak. Rifles on the wall, custom receivers in glass cases, precision scopes that seemed less like tools and more like instruments. To customers, Kate was simply the best gunsmith in the region. Reliable, reserved, someone who spoke more with her work than her words. But that copper bracelet on her wrist, engraved with meaningless numbers and letters, it wasn't meaningless at all. She greeted Marcus Webb across the street, a former SEAL now turned mechanic. His wave was casual. "Storm coming Friday, Kate. Big one. Batten down tight." She smiled politely, nodding. "Thanks for the heads up." To him, to everyone, she was Catherine Morgan, 40-ish, former Marine. A woman who had traded battles for barrels, combat for craftsmanship, but the truth was a deeper shadow. Her cabin above the valley wasn't just a cabin, it was a fortress. Her eyes never stopped tracking strangers who entered her shop. Her body, though calm, moved like someone forever counting exits. And when her hand traced the barrel of a .308 rifle, it wasn't nostalgia, it was instinct. Because she hadn't always been Catherine Morgan. Once, she had been Hannah Reynolds, the best long-range shooter in Gray Fox, the intelligence community's most secretive unit. Her records claimed she died in Yemen 15 years ago, and that's exactly how her government wanted it. The bell above the door chimed. She looked up. Sheriff Robert Miller stood there, rain on his hat, lines of wisdom carved into his face, one of the few people she respected. "Got a minute?" he asked, his voice low. In the back office, with the door closed, his words came blunt. 4 men checked into the Lakeview Motel yesterday, claimed they're researchers. Cornell, supposedly. But Cornell doesn't have any studies running here, and one of them's got an Eastern European accent. Kate's expression didn't change, but inside something sharp turned over. "What are they asking about?" she said evenly. "The old military installation, Whiteface Ridge, Cold War bunker." He paused. "And they've been digging for details, access points, underground systems." Eastern European. The words rang like distant thunder. She remembered heat, sand, the weight of a Barrett rifle, and the scream of a man crying his brother's name. The past wasn't past. "Could be nothing," Miller continued. "But after those Crimson Talon attacks in London and Berlin, I figured you should know." Kate only nodded. "Thanks, Sheriff, keep me updated." When he left, she locked the office door. Her hand slid beneath the desk, lifting floorboards to reveal a satellite phone no one was supposed to know existed. "One number, one call." "Harrison," came the voice on the other end. "It's me," Kate whispered. "Visitors, Eastern European, asking about Whiteface." Silence, then, "Stay put. I'll be there tomorrow. Tell no one." The line went dead. She replaced the phone, her mind already calculating possibilities. Harrison wouldn't come unless the threat was real, which meant Lakeside wasn't safe anymore. That night sleep betrayed her, the same dream, the same desert. April, Yemen, Operation Sandviper. She lay prone on a rooftop, her scope sweeping over a building below. Her team, 6 of the best, moved silently through the rooms, converging on a target. Anton Vyulov, the man behind embassy bombings. But when they breached, the bed was empty. Gunfire erupted. Her scope filled with heat signatures flaring and dying. Her team, her brothers, cut down in seconds. She fired, taking enemies one by one, desperate. And then she saw him, Vyulov, fleeing with another man at his side, his brother Ivan. Her breath steadied. One shot, one life. The bullet split the air. Ivan fell. Anton turned back, screaming, his voice carrying across the night. Words in Russian she would never forget. "Find her. I will have her head." And then pain, fire in her neck, a counter-sniper's round, darkness swallowing her as Vyulov's rage echoed through the desert. She woke in her cabin, hand clutching the scar that still burned. 15 years hadn't dulled the memory. 15 years hiding as Catherine Morgan. 15 years pretending Hannah Reynolds was dead. But the dream had returned, because the storm had found her again. The next morning, as she adjusted the scope on a custom rifle, 5 men entered her shop. Civilians at first glance, but not to her eye. They moved with quiet precision. Their eyes read the exits. One stepped forward, tall, weathered combat written into his posture. "Catherine Morgan?" he asked. "That's me." "Jason Reynolds," he said, offering a hand. "My team and I are in town for training. Sheriff Miller said you were the one to see about optics." Her grip was steady, her smile polite, but inside her mind was already racing. His name, his bearing, his men. They weren't weekend warriors, they weren't tourists. They were SEALs. And for reasons that weren't chance, they had just walked into her life. Her story was unraveling, piece by piece. The strangers in the motel, the SEAL team in her shop, the storm rolling toward Whiteface Ridge. And somewhere, perhaps already closer than she dared imagine, Anton Vyulov. 15 years hadn't been enough to bury him, or her. And now she would have to decide whether to keep hiding or to become who she truly was again. Because ghosts don't stay buried forever. Why were Navy SEALs asking about an abandoned Cold War bunker in the Adirondacks? Kate had lived with secrets long enough to know coincidence rarely existed. And now Commander Jason Reynolds stood in her shop with the kind of presence that made the air feel heavier. His men scanned the walls of rifles like they were studying terrain. Nothing about them said casual. "What kind of equipment?" she asked. "Optics," Reynolds replied. "Scopes, Rangefinders. Weather doesn't get much worse than this, and we're training in it." His eyes flicked to the storm clouds outside, then back to her. Kate unlocked a cabinet, laying out Schmidt and Bender models with a craftsman's precision. But her attention wasn't on the glass. It was on him. The way his jaw tightened. The way his men instinctively spread, covering sightlines without being told. "SEAL Special Mission Unit, Elite. You've modified this trigger," one of them noted, lifting a custom rifle from the rack. "Not standard issue." Kate's lips tugged faintly. "Factory pull was too heavy for real precision. I tuned it down to 2.5. He nodded with respect, and Reynolds caught the exchange. He studied her longer than was polite. "You were military," he said. Marines, she replied simply. Weapons specialist, nothing special. Nothing special, the lie tasted bitter. Because Hannah Reynolds' ghost had been anything but ordinary. When the men left, Reynolds lingered. Sheriff mentioned the old installation up on Whiteface Ridge, good terrain for training. There it was, the question she'd been waiting for. Mostly sealed, she said carefully. Security fencing, no trespassing signs. Locals hunt around the edges for the sightlines. Reynolds nodded, his expression unreadable. Sounds perfect. But his next words sliced deeper. Any other visitors asking about it? Her hand paused on the counter, their gazes locked. You mean besides the four pretending to be researchers? She asked flatly. A flicker of tension crossed his face. So you know. I know this town, she said. Strangers stand out. A long silence stretched between them. Then Reynolds nodded to his men. Give us the room. The door closed behind them. For the first time, his voice shed its casual tone. You're not just a gunsmith, are you? Her hand drifted toward the Glock hidden under the counter. I'm whatever I need to be to protect this town. Reynolds leaned in, voice low. My team was dispatched to secure a sensitive asset at Whiteface. Crimson Talon is here too, those so-called researchers. If you've read the news, you know what they're capable of. Kate's chest tightened. London, Berlin, dozens dead in coordinated strikes. Vulov's signature echoed in every one. And now they were here. What's a Whiteface? She asked. That's classified. She stepped from behind the counter, her calm mask slipping just enough for her eyes to cut sharp. If you think you're going into that mountain without me, you're already dead. That facility isn't just a bunker. It's a SADM site. Reynolds froze, his hand dropped from his vest, his eyes hardened. How do you know that classification? Instead of answering, she pressed a hidden latch on the wall. The wood panel slid back, revealing an armory most special operators would envy. Rifles, carbines, suppressed pistols, go bags ready for war. Reynolds studied her with new weight. Who the hell are you? Kate slung a rifle over her shoulder. Someone who died in Yemen 15 years ago. His eyes widened, and then her phone rang. Sheriff Miller's voice cracked through the receiver, urgent. Kate, they're moving, armed up to Whiteface now. She hung up, turned to Reynolds. You can keep asking who I am, or you can follow me into the storm. What? The SUV chewed gravel as they climbed the mountain road, rain spitting harder by the minute. Reynolds drove, issuing radio orders to his men scattered ahead. Kate sat silent in the passenger seat, eyes scanning tree lines. Your men are walking into an ambush, she said finally. Reynolds glanced at her. How do you know? Because I know Vulov. If you've seen 4, there are 4 more you haven't. He never moves without layers, always more waiting in shadow. You know him, Reynolds said carefully. Kate kept her eyes on the forest. I killed his brother. Silence filled the SUV, heavy. Yemen, Reynolds murmured. Operation Sandvipur. Her jaw tightened. Ghost has overwatch, she whispered, hearing the words as if the desert were still beneath her. Reynolds slammed the brakes. The SUV skidded to a halt. He turned to her, shock in his eyes. Ghost, he said, you're Ghost. She met his gaze, calm, cold. I was. For a moment he said nothing. Every operator knew the name. Ghost. The ISA sniper who had placed impossible shots, who had vanished after Yemen. A myth. A story whispered in training rooms. And now she sat beside him, alive. I thought you were killed, he said quietly. I was supposed to be, Kate replied. Bullet hit my neck. Harrison pulled me out, new identity, Catherine Morgan. The world needed me dead. Reynolds gripped the wheel, piecing it together. So why reveal yourself now? She checked the magazine of her rifle. Because you can't stop what's inside Whiteface without me. Before he could answer, his radio crackled. Commander, hostiles have breached the main entrance. Repeat, valid access codes. Primary blast door open. Reynolds and Kate locked eyes. Someone's helping them, she said. Inside help, a traitor. The SUV surged forward. What? The forest pressed close as they abandoned the vehicle and moved on foot. Rain turned soil into slick mud. Thunder rolled like artillery overhead. Kate moved like a ghost, her rifle an extension of her body. 15 years of exile melted in seconds. She was back. "Tell me about Vyulov," Reynolds whispered. Kate's voice was low, steady. Spetsnaz before the collapse, built Crimson Talon from elite fragments. He isn't just a terrorist, he's a commander, disciplined, patient. Every move calculated, and his vendetta against me, that's personal. I put a .50 caliber through his brother's skull from over a kilometer. He'll never stop until he answers it. You think he's here? I know he is. They reached the eastern slope. Kate's implanted memory stirred, guiding her steps. She brushed moss from a rocky outcrop and pressed 3 points in sequence. With a hiss, the stone slid aside, revealing a dark tunnel mouth. Reynolds stared. How the hell? Harrison put it in my head, she said flatly. Psychological implantation. I was the failsafe, a human key. Before he could respond, voices drifted from deeper in the tunnel. Russian, 2 men, armed. Kate doused her light, her body sinking into perfect silence. She signaled with 2 fingers. 2 heat signatures glowed ahead through her thermal scope. We need one alive, Reynolds whispered. Kate nodded, and together they moved like predators in the dark. The tunnel opened into a small chamber. The Crimson Talon operatives were bent over a security panel, unaware. Reynolds called out sharply, "Federal agents, hands up." The men spun, drawing pistols. Shots cracked, suppressed bursts answered. One went down, chest torn open. The other screamed as Kate's round caught his shoulder. He crumpled. In seconds she was on him. Zip ties cutting into his wrists, her voice in fluent Russian, low and merciless. How many more in the tunnels? Bloodied teeth flashed in a grim smile. You will all die, he has come for you, ghost. The name spoken like a curse. Kate's stomach clenched cold. Vyulov was here. What? When Colonel James Harrison finally appeared in the tunnel, flanked by grizzled veterans who moved with the poise of ghosts themselves, Kate almost didn't believe it. But the look in his eyes told her everything. Crimson Talon is inside, he said grimly, and they have help. They're converging on the command center. Kate's voice was quiet, steady. Then we move now. Because the storm was no longer coming. It was here. And ghosts don't run from storms. What happens when the past you've buried walks straight out of the shadows? The tunnel walls dripped with condensation, red emergency lighting casting long, blood-colored streaks across the concrete. Kate's footsteps were silent, but her pulse thundered louder than the storm above. They had a prisoner, a Crimson Talon operative, wounded, zip-tied, spitting blood and curses in Russian. Reynolds crouched over him, his voice sharp. What's your team's objective? The man laughed, ragged. SADM, no, you are wrong, not bomb, Winterhawk. The name cut through Kate like shrapnel. Her breath caught, memory fragments flooding forward, not her own, yet as clear as if she had lived them. A code name, a contingency, a shadow plan buried so deep only whispers had survived. What's Winterhawk? Reynolds pressed. The man smiled, defiant. By the time you find out, it will already be too late, and then, he turned his face toward Kate, Ghost will finally die. Reynolds slammed him against the wall. Answer. Kate touched his arm, stopping him. Her voice was ice. He already told us everything we need. Vyulov is here, and he's not after the bomb. Reynolds studied her face as if weighing how much to believe. Harrison's voice cut in, gravel deep. She's right. Winterhawk was never just about demolition devices. It was an intelligence reorganization protocol, I knew pieces but never the whole. His jaw clenched. If Vyulov gets it, he could reroute every American deep cover agent worldwide, redirect them, or expose them. Thousands dead, governments destabilized overnight. The words hung heavy in the stale air. Kate exhaled slowly, the truth pressing into her bones. So the nuclear device wasn't the prize, it was the lock. Winterhawk is what they came for. The prisoner smirked, and you are too late. Kate didn't hesitate, she turned, her voice flat. Leave him, time's running out. Reynolds hesitated only a second before following. Harrison and his men fell in. The wounded operative's laugh echoed down the tunnel, chilling in its certainty. What? The tunnels twisted deeper into the mountain, a labyrinth of Cold War paranoia. Kate moved at point, her flashlight cutting across rusted pipes and aging warning signs. Her implanted memories guided her with eerie precision. She turned left before her eyes even found the junction, ducked beneath a low beam before her mind consciously recalled it. Reynolds whispered from behind, "It's like you've been here before." Her jaw tightened. "In a way I have." "What's it feel like?" Kate hesitated. The question wasn't tactical, it was personal, and something in his tone made her answer. "Like remembering a story someone told me a long time ago," she said softly. "Except the story's written inside my head. Details surface when I need them, sometimes clear, sometimes like smoke." She didn't say the rest, that it terrified her, that her own memories sometimes blurred at the edges, and she wondered where Hannah ended and Catherine began. They reached a heavy blast door, its biometric panel still glowing faintly. Kate placed a hand against the cold steel. "This is the main command center entrance," she murmured. "But it requires full authentication, retina, palm, voice." "Can we breach it?" Reynolds asked. Harrison shook his head. "Not without alerting every Crimson Talon operator inside. And if Stanton's really involved," his eyes darkened, "they'll know we're here." Kate closed her eyes, the memories stirred again. "There's another way, maintenance shaft J7. It bypasses this section, leads to the climate control room next door." Reynolds arched a brow. "And you just know that?" She tapped her temple. "Welcome to being a human vault." The utility room door groaned as they forced it open. A narrow shaft stretched ahead, no wider than a crawl space, thick with dust and cobwebs. Kate went first, her movements precise, mechanical. Reynolds followed close, Harrison and the others behind. The air pressed in tight, the only sound their breathing and the scrape of gear against metal. Kate's mind flickered, unbidden, to Yemen, the sand-choked crawlspace of a collapsed building. Teammates trapped, their cries fading one by one. A hand touched her boot. Reynolds, his voice whispered forward, "You okay?" She forced the memory down. "Keep moving." 10 minutes later, she reached a grated vent. Through it, pale light revealed the climate control room, and the figure she had prayed she'd never see again. Anton Vyulov. Older now, silver at his temples, but power radiated from him, as cold and precise as the day she had seen him in Yemen. His presence filled the room, tactical gear immaculate, movements deliberate. Beside him, men armed and alert. At the computer, a technician furiously typing as numbers crawled across the screen. Data, files, Winterhawk. And then she saw the suit. General William Stanton, former Secretary of Defense. His voice carried faintly, even through the vent, commanding, arrogant. A man who had once sworn oaths, now standing shoulder to shoulder with America's enemy. Kate's stomach turned. Betrayal didn't always come from across oceans. Sometimes it grew inside your own house. Reynolds touched her shoulder, eyes locked on Stanton. His face was grim. "We have a traitor." Harrison's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. His silence spoke louder than words. Kate backed them away, retreating far enough to speak without risk. "5 inside," she whispered. "Volkov, Stanton, 3 operatives, 1 technician." "We could hit them now," Reynolds said. Element of surprise. Harrison shook his head. If one round hits those servers, the Winterhawk files are gone, and if Stanton escapes with even part of them, then we can't wait, Kate cut in. Her voice was iron. Every second they're downloading, more agents' lives are at risk. We need a distraction. Reynolds studied her, in his eyes a question. Kate's answer was a grim smile. I think I can arrange that. What? Outside, in the teeth of the storm, Sheriff Miller's SUV rattled up the mountain road. Wind shoved the vehicle sideways, rain blinding the windshield. Marcus Webb clutched a shotgun in the passenger seat, his knuckles white. In the back, Dr. Elizabeth Cooper tightened straps on a med kit. This is insane, Marcus muttered. Civilians don't belong in a firefight between spec ops and terrorists. Miller's eyes never left the road. Kate asked for backup. That's all I needed to hear. Elizabeth's voice was sharper than fear. Backup or bait. Miller's jaw tightened. People she trusts, that's us. The facility loomed ahead, its outer gate torn open, shell casings scattered. Dead men in black tactical gear lay sprawled across the mud. The storm screamed overhead, lightning illuminating the carnage. A SEAL stepped from the tree line, weapon raised. Recognition flashed when he saw Miller's badge. Sheriff, Commander Reynolds said you'd be coming. Miller handed over a pack Kate had prepared. The SEAL checked it, grinned. Perfect. Enough bang to make them look our way. Marcus exhaled slowly. Distraction duty, figures. The SEAL led them inside, deeper into the facility. The concrete echoed with storm-muffled thunder and the distant shuffle of hostile boots. Crimson Talon had dug in. And soon, the storm above and the war below would collide. In the shaft, Kate's body was still as stone, her rifle trained through the grate. Vyulov leaned closer to Stanton, their voices carrying faintly now. The download is 70%, the technician reported. Too slow, Stanton snapped. We need everything before the storm compromises power. Vyulov's reply was calm, mocking. You built this fortress, General. Have you so little faith in your own creation? Stanton's jaw flexed, but his words chilled Kate more than his arrogance. If Ghost is alive, he said, she will come, and when she does, we'll finish what Yemen started. Vyulov's head turned slightly, as though sensing eyes in the dark. His voice dropped low. Ghost, I can smell her already. Kate's chest tightened. Every scar, every nightmare, every lost face from Yemen pressed in around her. And for the first time in 15 years, she let herself admit the truth. This wasn't just a mission. It was a reckoning. Thunder shook the mountain. Somewhere deeper, metal screamed under strain. The storm above was tearing the forest apart, but the storm inside Whiteface was only beginning. Kate's whisper was steady as steel. When the distraction hits, we strike. Vyulov won't escape again. Reynolds nodded, his jaw firm. Harrison's eyes narrowed, but his voice was calm. No mistakes. Winterhawk files are priority. Kate's gaze didn't leave the vent, and so is justice. Because storms pass. But vengeance waits. What do you trade when the truth demands more than your silence can hold? Kate pressed her cheek against the cold steel of the vent, her rifle sight locked on the back of Stanton's head. It would be so easy. One squeeze, one shot, and the traitor would never speak another word. But one shot would also shatter the servers glowing behind him. Winterhawk would vanish into corrupted fragments, unreadable, irretrievable, and with it, the lives of every undercover operative depending on its secrecy. She lowered the rifle, her breath steady but her insides twisting. Killing had always been easy. Living with restraint, that was the war she still hadn't won. Reynolds whispered behind her, "We hit on the distraction, your call, Ghost." She almost corrected him, Catherine, but the name didn't matter anymore. Ghost was who Vyulov expected. Ghost was who Stanton feared. Ghost was who she had to become again, whether she wanted to or not. She exhaled, "On my mark." What? Outside, the storm roared as Sheriff Miller and Marcus Webb rigged the charges along the outer loading bay. Lightning snapped across the sky, illuminating their pale faces, soaked in rain and fear. "You sure about this?" Marcus muttered, fumbling with the detonator. Miller's jaw set hard. "Kate asked for a storm, we'll give her one." The SEAL with them gave a low countdown. 3, 2, 1. The night tore apart. Explosions thundered through the mountain, shaking its bones. Flames leapt skyward, painting the storm with fire. Crimson Talon operatives shouted, their boots pounding as they scrambled toward the outer breach. Inside, Vyulov's head snapped toward the tunnel wall, his instincts razor-sharp. "Contact! Outside perimeter!" Stanton swore, yanking the technician's shoulder. "Keep the download moving." Kate's eyes narrowed. This was the moment. "Now," she whispered. Reynolds and Harrison kicked the vent free. Metal screamed as it crashed to the floor. Kate dropped through, rifle up, her movements fluid, surgical. Reynolds followed, his men storming in with ruthless precision. Chaos detonated. 2 Talon guards fell instantly, rounds stitching their chests. The technician screamed, ducking beneath the console. Stanton dove for cover, drawing a pistol with hands that had once signed defense budgets. But Vyulov didn't flinch. He turned, calm as a wolf, eyes locking on Kate. Recognition burned between them, 15 years collapsing into one heartbeat. "Ghost," he said. His voice was a curse, a hymn, a promise fulfilled. Kate fired. He moved like smoke. The round shattered the console, sparks spraying across the room. The download froze at 83%. "Secure the servers," Harrison barked. But Vyulov's men had their orders. 2 grabbed hard drives, ripping cables. Vyulov covered their retreat, his pistol barking controlled shots that forced Reynolds' team behind cover. Kate pursued, her body remembering every lesson in violence she had ever learned. But Stanton's voice rang out over the chaos, raw and venomous. "Don't kill her, she's mine." Her blood ran cold. The man she'd once seen in Pentagon briefings, the man who had sworn to protect the very fabric of her nation, now wanted her caged, not dead. And for what? To silence her, to deliver her back to Vyulov as some twisted prize. The fury that rose in her chest nearly drowned her. She vaulted a desk, firing as she moved. One of Vyulov's men dropped, clutching his throat. Another staggered under Reynolds' burst. But Vyulov himself was already backing toward the service exit, eyes never leaving hers. "Yemen was the beginning," he called, his accent cutting like broken glass. "Tonight, Ghost, you finish what you started." And then he vanished into the dark. Minutes later, silence settled heavy in the command center. The servers hissed faintly, screens cracked, the download halted mid-transfer. Harrison slammed a fist against the console. 83%, enough to compromise half our networks, not enough for them to fully weaponize. But God help the operatives whose files just walked out that door. Reynolds wiped sweat and blood from his brow. "We can track them. They can't have gotten far in this storm." Kate didn't answer. Her gaze was fixed on Stanton, pinned against the wall, blood streaking his cheek where Reynolds had struck him. His defiance hadn't dimmed. "You think you can stop it?" Stanton sneered. "Do you know what Washington does with secrets like Winterhawk? They bury them. They bury people like you with them. Vyulov isn't your enemy. He's the only one who understands how the game is played." Reynolds slammed him harder against the wall. "You sold out your country." "No," Stanton hissed. "I freed it from its own lies." Kate stepped forward, her shadow long in the broken red light. Her voice was low, calm, lethal. "You freed nothing. You just chose the side that paid you more." For the first time, Stanton faltered. Her eyes, unblinking, carried 15 years of exile, betrayal, and survival. "Lock him down," Harrison ordered. "We'll deal with him later. Vyulov is priority." 2 SEALs dragged Stanton away, his curses echoing down the tunnel. Kate lowered her rifle, her body trembling in ways she hadn't allowed it to in years. She closed her eyes, inhaled, exhaled. But the memory came unbidden anyway, her brother's voice, calling her name across the desert before it was swallowed by fire. Reynolds' hand brushed her shoulder, grounding. "You good?" Her whisper was barely audible. "I can't bury it again." He didn't ask what she meant. He didn't need to. What? Hours bled into dawn as the storm outside finally relented, leaving the mountain cloaked in fog. They moved through the lower tunnels, following the trail Vyulov's men had cut. The air smelled of smoke, cordite, and betrayal. Kate led, every sense sharpened. Vyulov was close. She could feel it, the way you feel lightning just before it strikes. They reached a collapsed section where concrete had caved under decades of strain. Mud pooled through cracks, seeping into the corridor. Vyulov's footprints were there, sharp and undeniable. Harrison crouched, studying them. He split his men, 2 with the drives, 1 decoy trail. He's playing for time. Kate's voice was steady. "Then we stopped playing." She moved ahead, her rifle tight, her heart pounding with every step. Every echo carried ghosts. Yemen, her fallen brothers, Vyulov's scream when his brother fell. And beneath it all, a truth she hadn't wanted to admit until now. This wasn't about Winterhawk anymore, or even vengeance. It was about proving to herself that she hadn't lived these 15 years in the shadows for nothing. What? They reached a service hatch that opened onto the mountainside. The fog curled like smoke, the storm's remnants clawing at the trees, and in the clearing below, through her scope, Kate saw him. Vyulov, standing calm, rifle slung, as if the storm belonged to him. Beside him, 2 of his men. One carried a hard drive case, the other scanned the tree line. Reynolds whispered, "We take the flank, signal on your shot." But Kate didn't move. Her breath slowed. Her finger caressed the trigger guard. Memories collided, the scream of Ivan dying, the counter-sniper's bullet in her neck, Harrison's hands dragging her back from death. This was the circle. This was the moment fate had always been pulling her toward. Her scope centered on Vyulov's chest. She steadied, she squeezed. And froze. Because in the glass, for just an instant, she didn't see Vyulov. She saw her own reflection. Cold, alone, a ghost with no home but the storm. Her heart slammed, her finger trembled. Reynolds hissed, "Take the shot." But she couldn't, not yet, not like this. Because killing Vyulov wouldn't silence the storm inside her. Not until she understood what it really meant to live again. What? The shot never came. Vyulov turned, almost as if he knew, and melted into the fog. His men followed, vanishing like smoke. Kate lowered the rifle, her chest hollow. Reynolds cursed under his breath. Harrison's eyes narrowed, reading her like only he could. "You hesitated," he said. Her silence was answer enough. And in the quiet that followed, one truth lingered heavier than the storm itself. The reckoning wasn't over. It was only beginning. How do you chase a ghost when the ghost is yourself? Fog blanketed the mountain like a shroud, swallowing the tree line, muffling every sound. Kate crouched in the wet soil, her rifle heavy across her lap, her heart heavier still. The shot she hadn't taken echoed louder than thunder ever could. Reynolds paced behind her, restless. "We had him right there, and you froze." His words cut deep, but his voice wasn't anger. It was disbelief. Kate didn't turn. Her eyes stayed fixed on the fog below. "You think a bullet ends Vyulov. That's his trick. He makes you think killing him is the victory. It's not. He's already moved the files, already spread his poison. Even if I killed him, we'd still be chasing shadows." Reynolds stopped packing. His silence pressed harder than his words. Finally, he said, "You're not the myth they told us about, are you?" She looked at him then, her face calm but her eyes raw. "No, I'm worse, because myths don't bleed." Harrison's voice broke the tension. "Enough. The drives are moving and so is he, our windows closing. Kate stood slinging her rifle. Then we hunt. What? They tracked through the forest, the storm dripping from branches like sweat off a fighter's brow. Mud sucked at their boots. The mountain groaned with the aftershock of explosions and thunder. Kate led, her movements steady, her instincts sharper than any GPS. Each broken branch, each disturbed patch of moss told her Vyulov's direction. But her thoughts drifted, against her will, back to Yemen. Back to Ivan's body falling, back to Anton's scream of vengeance, back to the searing pain of her own blood soaking into sand. She had lived 15 years pretending Hannah Reynolds was dead. But in truth, Ghost had never left her. Ghost had been the silence in every sleepless night, the reason she couldn't laugh too hard, love too deeply, or breathe too freely. And now Vyulov was here to remind her. Ghost wasn't just who she had been. Ghost was all she had left. Contact. Reynolds' voice snapped her back. He pointed downslope. Through the thinning fog they spotted movement, 2 Crimson Talon operatives guiding a case between them, the hard drives. Kate signaled, 3 fingers flank. She moved like a shadow, circling, her rifle rising to her shoulder. Reynolds mirrored her, eyes sharp, breath steady. The operatives stopped near a stream, arguing in Russian. One slipped, cursing. The other shoved him. For a heartbeat they were distracted. Kate fired. One collapsed into the mud, skull snapping back. Reynolds' burst tore through the second. The case fell, splashing in the stream. Kate sprinted forward, yanking it free, her hands trembling as she opened it. Inside, 2 drives blinking faintly. Intact. Relief cracked her chest open, and then a voice froze her. Always efficient, Ghost, still stealing what belongs to me. She spun. Vyulov stood across the stream, mist curling around him like smoke. His pistol was steady, aimed directly at her heart. For a moment no one moved, no one breathed. "You think you took my brother from me," Vyulov said, his accent sharp as the cold. "But you only gave me purpose. For 15 years I built Crimson Talon on his grave, and every bullet I've fired since has had your name etched into it." Kate's voice was calm, but her insides shook. "Ivan chose his side. You chose yours, and I'll finish what Yemen should have." Vyulov's smile was thin. "You had your chance." A shot cracked, not hers, not Reynolds'. From the ridge above, gunfire erupted, Crimson Talon reinforcements pouring fire into the clearing. Trees splintered, mud exploded, the stream churned red. Reynolds tackled Kate behind a fallen log, rounds whining overhead. Harrison's men returned fire, but they were pinned. Vyulov vanished into the fog, his laughter carrying like thunder. Kate clutched the case tight, her teeth clenched. Every instinct screamed to chase him, but the drives burned heavier in her hands than any rifle. Reynolds shouted over the chaos, "We've got what we came for, pull back." But Kate shook her head. "No, this doesn't end with files, it ends with him." Bullets chewed bark inches above her skull. The forest screamed with war. And for the first time since Yemen, Kate felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Fear. Not of dying, but of failing again. They fought their way upslope, retreating under cover fire. Harrison's voice barked commands, his men peeling back in disciplined bursts. Grenades tore chunks of earth, smoke blinding their path. Kate moved like a machine, her rifle spitting precise death, her body carrying her forward even as her heart faltered. She couldn't see Vyulov anymore, couldn't hear him, but she could feel him, like a storm cloud, heavy and waiting, never gone. When they finally broke into a clearing, breath ragged, ammo low, Harrison called the retreat. "We exfil with what we have. Birds inbound." Kate spun, fury in her eyes. "You don't understand. He'll come again. He won't stop until I'm dead. You can run, but he'll keep hunting me." Reynolds gripped her arm, hard, his eyes burned. "Then let him hunt, because you're not alone this time." The words hit harder than any bullet. For 15 years she had carried her war alone, and now someone else dared to share the weight. But she didn't answer, couldn't. Because deep down, she knew Vyulov wasn't after anyone else. He was after Ghost, and Ghost was her. What? Dawn painted the mountains pale gray as the helicopter thundered low, rotors cutting fog into ribbons. They loaded the case aboard, Harrison barking updates into his comms. Reynolds checked his men, silent but steady. Kate lingered at the tree line, her rifle still in her hands, her eyes scanning the fog. Vyulov wasn't gone. She knew it. He was waiting. Her chest tightened. A whisper escaped her lips, so soft the storm itself almost stole it. Why didn't I take the shot? The question hollowed her. Not tactical, not logical, deep, human. Reynolds' voice carried behind her. Because you're not the ghost they think you are. You're still human, and that's what terrifies him most. She turned. For once she let someone see the fracture in her armor, her eyes wet, her jaw trembling. Being human got my team killed in Yemen. Reynolds stepped closer, his voice low, steady. No, being abandoned did. Don't confuse the two. His words lingered as the bird lifted them skyward, carrying them out of the storm. But Kate knew storms didn't end when the rain stopped. Storms lived inside you. And hers was only getting stronger. What? That night back at the safe house, silence pressed heavier than gunfire. Harrison debriefed with Washington over encrypted channels. Reynolds cleaned his weapon with mechanical care. Kate sat alone, the case of drives locked beside her, her eyes lost in the flames of the fireplace. In the crackle and pop of burning wood she heard Yemen, the rooftop crumbling beneath her brother's last cries, Vyulov's scream of vengeance, the sniper's bullet finding her neck. She touched the scar, her breath catching. For the first time in years, she spoke aloud what she had never dared to admit. I should have died that night. The words filled the room like smoke. Reynolds looked up from his rifle. His voice was calm but heavy. Then maybe you lived for this one. Kate's eyes lifted, wet and fierce. And in the flickering firelight, the storm inside her raged on. What happens when the place meant to keep you safe becomes the cage your enemy already owns? The safe house crouched in the valley like a forgotten relic, its walls of timber and stone whispering old promises of refuge. Inside, the fire cracked, radios hummed, and weapons lay stripped and reassembled in practiced silence. For the first time in days, the storm outside had thinned into a drizzle, but inside Kate's chest, it still thundered. She sat by the window, her reflection pale in the glass, eyes locked on the tree line. Her hand traced the scar at her neck, absent, restless. She hated that the scar still pulsed when she thought of him. Vyulov. Her storm was always tied to his shadow. Reynolds broke the silence, his voice low. Birds taking the drives to Langley at first light. Harrison says DC wants them scrubbed before noon. Kate nodded. The drives weren't victory, they were delay. Vyulov would never hinge his plan on a single copy, but she said nothing. Instead, she asked the question that had eaten at her since the mountain. Why did you pull me behind that log, Jason? You had a clean shot. Reynolds blinked, surprised. Because you're worth more alive than a bullet exchange. Her eyes narrowed. That hesitation could have cost us everything. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, voice sharp. No, Ghost. What cost us was your hesitation. Don't put that on me. The word hit her like shrapnel. Ghost. Spoken not as reverence, not as myth, but as a mirror, and she hated it. She turned back to the window, jaw tight. Then maybe you don't know who you're fighting beside. The crackle of the fire filled the silence that followed. What? Harrison returned from the comms room, face carved in stone. Stanton, been transferred to a secure holding site 2 miles out. Sealed detachment, guarding him until extraction. Kate's gut twisted. That's a mistake. Reynolds frowned. He's under heavy guard. Doesn't matter, she snapped. Stanton's not afraid of steel bars, he's afraid of me. And if Vyulov wants leverage, Stanton's the key. Harrison's jaw tightened. Orders came from above. Washington wants him alive for trial. Kate stood, voice low but sharp. Washington doesn't understand what they're holding. Stanton isn't just a traitor, he's Vyulov's bridge, and bridges don't collapse on their own. Her words lingered like smoke, and no one had time to answer before the first explosion ripped the night apart. What? The safe house shook, timbers groaning, glass shattering. Firelight flared and vanished as the power cut. Automatic gunfire stitched across the walls, sparks showering. "Contact," Harrison barked, already driving toward cover. Kate grabbed her rifle, instincts taking command before thought could catch up. She pulled Reynolds down as rounds shattered the window. The night outside burned with muzzle flashes, shadows moving fast, precise. Crimson Talon. "They found us," Reynolds growled. "No," Kate whispered, her blood turning to ice. "They were sent." The front door blew inward. 3 operatives stormed through, rifles barking. Kate rolled, firing clean. 1 dropped. Reynolds cut the 2nd down. Harrison tackled the 3rd, blade flashing in the strobe of gunfire. More poured through the back, relentless, disciplined. This wasn't a raid. This was an execution. And somewhere in the chaos, Kate knew Stanton was smiling. "What?" They fell back into the cellar, the old stone walls trembling under the onslaught. Ammo was low, options fewer. Reynolds wiped blood from a cut on his forehead. "We can hold until extraction." Kate shook her head. "No, extraction won't come. Vyulov controls the timing now. He doesn't want the drives, he wants me." Her words tasted like ash, because she knew they were true. Every move, every strike, every corpse Vyulov left behind carried one message. "Ghost, I will finish what Yemen started." Harrison braced a rifle on the cellar stairs. "Then maybe it's time we let him come." Kate's hands trembled, not from fear, from rage, from 15 years of exile boiling over into this one storm. She touched the scar again, her whisper almost a vow. "Then he'll learn what ghost really means." What? Minutes bled into eternity. Gunfire slowed, then ceased. The silence pressed heavier than the storm ever had. And then came the voice. Muffled, amplified, carried through the night like a sermon. "Ghost," Vyulov called, his accent thick, his tone calm, mocking. "How long will you hide? How long will you let others die for you?" Kate's chest locked. His voice pulled her straight back to Yemen, the rooftop, the burning night, Ivan's scream, her own blood soaking the sand. "Come to me," Vyulov continued, "or I will burn your new family alive like I burned the old one." Reynolds clenched his jaw. "He wants you exposed, don't give it to him." But her feet moved before she could stop them, toward the stairs, toward the door, toward the storm. Because some ghosts don't run. They answer. What? The night outside glowed with firelight, the safe house burning at the edges. Rain hissed against the flames, and in the clearing, calm as a priest, stood Anton Vyulov. Dozens of Talon operatives fanned behind him, weapons lowered but ready. At his side, dragged forward in chains, was Stanton, untouched, unbloodied, grinning like a wolf. "See," Stanton called, "I told you she couldn't resist. Ghost doesn't let storms pass, she walks into them." Kate's rifle was steady, but her hands shook. Not from weakness, from the war inside her. Vyulov spread his arms. "There you are, the myth, the phantom, the one shot that built 15 years of my empire. Tell me, Ghost, did it feel worth it, killing a brother to make another man a god?" His words carved deeper than his bullets ever could. Kate wanted to scream, wanted to fire, wanted to end him, but her finger froze again, the storm inside her louder than the rain. Reynolds' whisper carried at her side. "You don't have to carry this alone, not anymore." For a moment, she almost believed him. But Vyulov's next words shattered her. "Your team in Yemen, they didn't die from my hand. They died because your bullet was too slow." Her body locked. Every scream, every corpse, every nightmare all her fault. At least, that's what his voice made her believe. The storm broke inside her. She dropped her rifle and stepped forward. "What?" Reynolds grabbed her arm, furious. "What are you doing?" Her eyes met his, raw and hollow. "Ending this." Harrison shouted, "Kate, do." But Vyulov's smile widened, the smile of a man who had already won. "Good," he whispered. "Come back to where you belong." And Ghost, the name she had buried, rose inside her again. Not the legend, not the myth, but the broken woman who had been carrying a bullet for 15 years. What? The fire roared, the rain poured, the storm howled. And somewhere between the flames and the fog, Kate Morgan, Hannah Reynolds' ghost, finally broke. The question was no longer whether she would kill Vyulov. It was whether she would lose herself doing it. How far can you bend before you finally break? The rain hissed against burning timbers as Kate stepped into the open, her rifle abandoned in the mud. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Crimson Talon operatives shifted, unsure if this was surrender or trap, but Vyulov's smile never wavered. He raised a hand and the rifles lowered. The clearing was his cathedral, the fire his stained glass, the storm his choir. Kate stood at the center of it all, her eyes locked on him. "Why?" she asked, her voice hoarse, broken. 15 years, why chase a ghost?" Vyulov tilted his head. "Because ghosts are the only enemies worth hunting. The living fear bullets, the dead fear nothing, but you live in between. That makes you mine." Behind her, Reynolds shouted from cover, voice sharp with fury. "Kate, don't listen to him. He's playing you." She didn't look back. Her gaze stayed on Vyulov, even as his men surged forward, ripping her arms behind her, binding her wrists with steel. "Do you see?" Vyulov said softly, stepping closer. Rain beaded on his scars. "Even your allies doubt you, even you doubt yourself." His breath was warm against her ear as he whispered, "And doubt is the soil where empires grow." What? The world shrank to darkness, a hood over her head, the stink of damp fabric and diesel filling her lungs. She was shoved into a vehicle, wrists bruising against metal cuffs. Voices in Russian drifted around her, low, mocking. But beneath the hood, in the silence of her own chest, another voice spoke louder. Her own. "You had the shot. You didn't take it again. Yemen wasn't an accident. You're not a myth. You're a mistake." She clenched her teeth, forcing the thought down, but the storm inside her had grown too strong. Every memory replayed sharper than the next. Ivan falling, her brothers dying, Vyulov's scream, Stanton's betrayal, Reynolds' eyes when she hesitated. The hood came off with a rip. She blinked, disoriented. The safe house ruins were gone. She was underground again, but not in the Cold War tunnels. This place was rawer, unfinished, concrete walls, dripping pipes, a single lamp swaying overhead. And chained to a chair in front of her, battered but grinning, was Stanton. "I told you," he sneered. "Ghost always walks into the fire." Kate's fists tightened, but Vyulov stepped between them, calm, patient. "You don't hate him, Ghost, not truly. You hate yourself, and that is why you hesitate." He crouched, his eyes level with hers, cold and endless. "I could have killed you in Yemen, but I didn't. Do you know why?" She didn't answer, couldn't. "Because a dead enemy is finished, but a living one," his smile widened. "A living one destroys themselves for you." What? Hours blurred into torment. Interrogations. Silence. Stanton whispering poison into her ear about Washington abandoning her, about the futility of loyalty. Vyulov circling like a wolf, offering not death but absolution if she joined him. And inside her the storm raged. Was he wrong? Hadn't Washington buried her, declared her dead, erased her life, left her nameless and alone? Hadn't she spent 15 years not living but existing, a myth too dangerous to be real? Maybe Vyulov wasn't her hunter, maybe he was her mirror. But then through the storm came another voice. Not Vyulov, not Stanton's. Reynolds. She remembered his words in the safe house. You're not the ghost they think you are. You're still human. And that's what terrifies him most. She clung to it, like a match in the dark. When the breach came, it came like thunder. Explosions tore through the compound walls. Gunfire rattled the corridors. Shouts in English cut through Russian curses. Seals. Reynolds. Kate's heart surged as dust rained from the ceiling. Vyulov snarled, drawing his pistol, barking orders. His men scattered, returning fire. Stanton ducked, screaming as if the storm itself had turned against him. The chains on Kate's wrists bit deep. She twisted, pulled, teeth gritted. The storm inside her focused, not fractured. Her fingers found the pin on the cuff. Pressure, twist, pop. Freedom. She surged forward, slamming the chair leg into the guard's skull. He crumpled, blood spraying. She grabbed his rifle, spun, and fired point-blank into the second. Vyulov turned, eyes wide, not in fear but in recognition. "Ah," he said softly, "there she is." Ghost. What? The corridors became chaos. Seals clashed with Talon operatives, muzzle flashes painting the walls. Harrison stormed in, his voice hoarse from shouting. Reynolds fought like a man possessed, his eyes always searching for her. And then he found her. Kate. She turned, blood on her hands, rifle in her grip, eyes burning with a fury he hadn't seen before. Not Catherine. Not even Hannah. Ghost. For a heartbeat, he didn't recognize her, and for a heartbeat, neither did she. Because in becoming Ghost again, she feared she had lost the last of Catherine, the last of the woman who had tried to live, to love, to believe she was more than a weapon. But there was no time. Vyulov was retreating down the hall, Stanton scrambling behind him. Kate raised her rifle, her voice low, steady, final. "This ends tonight." She surged after them, the storm inside no longer breaking her, but driving her. The chase slammed through the compound's heart, into the storage bay where rain leaked through shattered concrete. Lightning flared outside through gaping holes in the wall, illuminating Vyulov and Stanton scrambling toward a waiting truck. Kate fired, rounds sparking against steel. Stanton ducked, shrieking. Vyulov turned, calm even under fire, returning shots that chewed into the walls inches from her head. Reynolds flanked left, Harrison's men pressed right. But Kate didn't wait. She pushed forward, closer, closer, her world narrowing to Vyulov's silhouette in the stormlight. 15 years of nightmares, 15 years of silence, 15 years of being a ghost. All of it barreled into this one moment. Her rifle rose, her breath steadied. No hesitation. She squeezed. The bullet screamed through the storm. Vyulov staggered, his shoulder erupting in blood. He dropped to one knee, pistol clattering to the floor. For the first time, his eyes widened, not with rage, not with triumph. With shock. Kate advanced, step by step, until her rifle was inches from his skull. "You built your empire on a lie," she whispered, "but ghosts don't serve kings." Her finger tightened. And then Stanton shouted, "If you kill him, you prove him right. You're nothing but a weapon, Ghost, nothing but a mistake." Her breath faltered, the storm inside her split again. Ghost wanted to pull the trigger, Catherine wanted to walk away. The world held its breath. And in that silence, she realized the truth. Killing Vyulov wouldn't free her. It would chain her forever to the name she hated. She lowered the rifle. Vyulov laughed, blood bubbling at his lips. "You still hesitate." But Reynolds was already moving, his pistol rising. The shot cracked. Vyulov collapsed. This time, he didn't get back up. What? Silence fell, broken only by the storm leaking through the broken roof. Stanton sobbed, scrambling backward, his empire crumbling around him. Kate stood frozen, her rifle lowered, her breath ragged. Reynolds stepped beside her, voice low. "You don't need to carry it anymore, not alone." Her eyes closed. For the first time the storm inside began to quiet, not vanish, never vanish, but soften. Because sometimes redemption isn't in the trigger you pull. It's in the one you let go. What? The operative secured Stanton, dragging him away in chains. Harrison barked final orders. The SEALs checked their wounded. And Kate. She stepped into the rain outside, lifting her face to the storm. The water washed blood from her skin, soothed the fire in her scar, cooled the war raging inside her. She wasn't Ghost anymore. Not Catherine. Not Hannah. Something else. Something new. And for the first time in 15 years, she let herself believe she could be more than the storm that made her. What remains when the storm finally breaks? The compound smoldered as dawn crept over the mountains, painting the fog in pale gold. Rain dripped from broken beams, hissed on cooling concrete, washed crimson into the earth. The night's violence hung heavy, but for the first time the silence felt like peace instead of waiting thunder. Kate stood at the edge of it all, her rifle slung, her shoulders trembling under a weight only she could feel. Around her, SEALs gathered the wounded, Harrison directed exfil, Reynolds barked checks over comms. Life moved forward as it always did after war. But Kate, she wasn't sure she belonged in that forward motion. Her eyes drifted to the place where Vyulov had fallen. A dark stain in the mud, rain already thinning it, erasing the man who had chased her across 15 years. He was gone, finally. And yet instead of triumph she felt nothing. No relief, no vengeance satisfied, only hollow. Reynolds approached quietly, his boots sinking into mud. He didn't speak at first, only stood beside her, watching the sunrise fight through the fog. "You didn't take the shot," he said finally. Kate's jaw tightened. "I wanted to." "But you didn't." His voice was calm, steady. "That matters." She shook her head. "Or it proves I'm broken. Twice I had him, twice I froze." Reynolds turned, his eyes cutting sharp. "No, it proves you're human. Ghost would have killed him without hesitation. Catherine Morgan didn't, and maybe that's the difference. Maybe that's what he could never understand." Her breath caught. The storm inside her shifted, softer, less consuming. "Maybe," she whispered. What? Later the SEALs marched Stanton out in chains. His suit was shredded, his face bloodied, but his arrogance hadn't dimmed. "You think this ends with Vyulov?" he sneered, his voice sharp even under restraint. "I know the rot in your government. I'll live to see every one of you discarded just like they discarded her." His eyes locked on Kate, filled with venom. "Tell me, Ghost, did you enjoy being buried by the same people you bled for?" Kate stepped forward, her face unreadable. Stanton leaned in, waiting for her to lash out, to confirm every word he'd thrown at her. But she didn't raise a fist, didn't raise her voice. She only whispered steady and quiet, "I wasn't buried, I survived." For the first time, Stanton's smirk faltered. "Sometimes," she added, "dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." She turned away before he could answer. He shouted after her, but his voice was already smaller, swallowed by the storm that no longer owned her. What? The flight out was subdued. A black hawk cutting low through the valley, rotors slicing the air. Harrison debriefed with Washington, his voice gravel through the headset. Reynolds sat opposite, cleaning his rifle with the same care he always did, though his eyes drifted to Kate more than the steel. She stared out the open side door. The landscape rolled beneath her, trees, rivers, towns waking in morning light. Ordinary life. A world that had never known her storm, a world she had spent years protecting from shadows. For the first time, she wondered if she could belong to it. Reynolds leaned close enough for his words to cut through the roar. "What now?" Kate didn't look at him, her eyes stayed on the horizon. "I don't know. For 15 years I only thought about hiding, or surviving, or ending him. I don't know what's left when all that's gone." He studied her for a moment, then said quietly, Maybe that's the point, to find out. She finally turned, meeting his gaze, and though she didn't smile, something softer lived in her eyes. Maybe, she said. What? Back in Lakeside, the shop door creaked open once more. The bell chimed, ordinary, familiar. Sunlight spilled across oak counters and polished steel. For the townsfolk, nothing had changed. To them, Catherine Morgan was still the quiet gunsmith, still the woman who waved politely, still the one who fixed their rifles with steady hands. But Kate knew better. Because the storm inside her had shifted, not gone, never gone, but no longer a curse she carried alone. She moved through the shop, her hands brushing the rifles, the tools, the walls that had been both her prison and her sanctuary. She paused at the copper bracelet on her wrist, the meaningless numbers, the lie she had lived under. She unclasped it slowly, set it on the counter, and walked away from it. Not Ghost, not Catherine. Something new. Someone who had lived the storm and walked out of it. What? That evening she stood by the lake, the water calm, the sky painted in gold and violet. Children laughed in the distance, chasing each other along the shore. Life moved on as it always did. Reynolds joined her, hands in his pockets, silent at first. Then he said, "You know, legends don't retire, myths don't fade, but people get to choose." She looked at him, her voice quiet. "And what do I choose?" He held her gaze. "Choose to live." The words lingered, simple, heavy, true. Kate turned back to the lake, her reflection rippling across the water. For the first time she didn't see a ghost staring back. She saw a woman, scarred, weathered, human. And that was enough. What? The storm had passed. But storms never vanish entirely. They live in scars, in memories, in choices. Kate knew hers would never leave her, but she also knew it didn't have to define her anymore. Because ghosts don't live. And she had decided she would. What? Sometimes the world doesn't honor its heroes. Sometimes it buries them. Sometimes it breaks them. But sometimes, a broken soldier chooses to rise anyway. Not for medals, not for headlines, not even for vengeance. But simply to be alive. And that is its own kind of victory. What? Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.